Warning: the following podcast contains graphic content that may be disturbing or triggering to some listeners. Discretion is advised. The Papa Tango Delta Sierra podcast is available free of charge thanks to the support of Cracked Armor. Their mission is to raise awareness for PTSD, TBI, and mental health to support those who struggle. By creating an army of warriors who represent the gear, their hope is that it will send the message to others that they are not alone. Go to crackedarmor.com, say hi to Mark Long, read about the story, find some research information about PTSD, and support the cause by buying some gear.
(10-9), did you say Papa Tango Sierra Delta? 10-4.
There's so much left to do, so many things I wanna say, and I say, don't make the change. If it rains every single day, I'll fight to blow it all away.
This is episode 12 of the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast. My name is Larry Payton, and I have been diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress. At times I'm asked that despite having CPTSD, how is it I'm able to be amongst crowds? Great question. Let's start off with the first obvious truth is that I absolutely despise being amongst crowds. I feel hypervigilant, overstimulated, overwhelmed, and it's absolutely and utterly exhausting because I feel that I have to watch my back at all times. So I don't like it. How is it I do it? Well, at times, like at the home show or at the outdoor show, when I assisted Cracked Armor in their booth, standing behind a table was enough for me to feel that my 12 was covered. Both sides of my 3 and my 9 were covered, and my back was to a wall, so my 6 was covered. And essentially, I did not need to be amongst the crowd of people. That helped a lot. Recently, however, I stepped back into an airport again, which was the first time since November of 2022 when I had, well, pretty much a fucking meltdown in one airport on the way to a final destination and in a different airport on the way back home. I don't like airports. I don't like crowds of people. It's too much going on for me. Way too much going on. That said, as I mentioned, was back in an airport. I was because before I ever needed to step back from work, I guess there was some talks about what was going to be a fantastic 50th birthday gift for me. My brother, my dad, and my wife had been discussing this for months and months and months. And what they had come up with was a distillery tour in Kentucky. So essentially the idea was my dad, my brother, and I would go visit a number of distilleries, bourbon distilleries, in Kentucky, enjoy 3 days together, staying at a VRBO, and just chill and relax and have a major celebration for my 50th birthday. The idea as well was that we flew into Nashville and flew out of Nashville. And so the last day we would spend the evening downtown Nashville. Okay. The airport part, I actually did pretty good in. I was surprised. Now, let's keep something straight. I'm medicated. I am fucking medicated. And if I was not medicated, that would not have gone well at all. So let's put that right out there. Don't look at me and go, how the fuck do you do that? I do it because I'm medicated. That helps big time. And just making sure that things could run as smoothly as possible. They didn't run that smoothly. That's the truth of it. However, I was quite impressed that I still managed to get through all those things, all those issues, all those speed bumps, and never had a meltdown, which speaks volumes not only about the fact that I'm medicated, but of how far I've come since stepping back from work. Because back in November, when I was at a very high point of stress and anxiety and burnout, I had some major meltdowns. So we get to Tennessee. My brother picks us up at the airport in Nashville, and we begin to drive on to Louisville, Kentucky. During those 3.5 days, it turned out, we got to visit 13 bourbon distilleries. And for me, being a complete and utter knowledge sponge, I paid attention to everything on the tours. Everything. For those who don't know, I also brew beer from scratch, from grains, from hops. I make my own recipes. I brew from scratch. So now I'm at bourbon distilleries, and I can't help but think, I can do this. I can definitely do this. And so it gets my mind active. It gets me thinking. The point I'm sharing with you about that is that when my mind is active and thinking, and I'm soaking up knowledge, that's a healthy place for me to be. That means my mind is not thinking of all the other shit that goes on. Wasn't even considering it. I was so enveloped on just gaining new knowledge. A couple of things I want to share about that, though. One of them is that there was one particular day my brother and I needed to go back to a distillery because we had left some things there purposely. We were planning on going back to pick them up. The distillery was aware. All was great. So my brother and I rented these motorized scooters. Very interesting. Never been on one before. You kind of just tap your credit card or your phone on it and you're good to go. But there's no way our dad was getting on that thing. No. I mean, not a chance. This year he's going to be 72. No. So we left Dad at the Louisville Slugger Stadium area at a brewery, and we said we'd be back as soon as we picked up our goods. So my brother and I took the scooters over, grabbed the goods, ended up getting an Uber back because the scooters were more expensive than an Uber, oddly enough. We met Dad at the brewery. He came along with us and we walked to our next stop. What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that about 8 days later, there was a shooting there at a bank just across the street that left 5 people dead. And that's how quickly these things can happen. It could have been very, very different when my brother and I had left Dad there and then peeling away hearing gunshots or coming back and the place being sealed off. That is the shit that starts igniting my CPTSD symptoms. It almost feels like as soon as I'm comfortable, I fucked up, and I should never have allowed myself to get comfortable. On Monday, we drove back to Nashville, and my brother, being full of piss and vinegar as he normally is, wanted us to head down to Broadway, the main strip downtown Nashville that everyone talks about. I had no desire whatsoever. Luckily, on these tours, we were never around big groups of people. They were all small. I think the biggest group we were with was maybe 20 people. But I knew things would be different heading down to Broadway in Nashville. My brother really wanted to head down there, and so we went down there. And it was kind of a zoo. I mean, it was a Monday night, so it wasn't completely out of control, but it was still kind of a zoo. We stopped at one place, and then we were ready to get the fuck out of there. Well, Dad and I were. My brother wasn't. Dad at that point said he was just tired and really needed to get back to the hotel, so my brother and I walked him back. Walking up out of the downtown core, we passed an area that I heard an absolutely beautiful voice singing, and I was intrigued. And I looked at my brother and said, I'd come back to hear that voice. So we dropped Dad off. My brother said, let's go see if we can find her. We got to about the same intersection, couldn't hear anything. Nothing. 15 seconds later, we could hear that voice again. We just walked forward down this street, trying to find from where this voice was coming. We passed right by a hotel, and if I recall, it was called Indigo Hotel, or Hotel Indigo, something like that. My brother happened to look in through the windows, and that was the voice. So we went in. Place was packed. I mean, it wasn't a huge place, but all the tables were accounted for. We managed to find a couple of spots at the bar, and we watched, and we listened. And it ended up being the most perfect ending of that trip. And in hindsight, I think it was actually serendipitous. You see, this young lady sang some beautiful songs that she had written. She had an amazing voice. And more importantly, she had just such a bold, happy, outgoing personality. I mean, she was just smiling. You could see she was thoroughly enjoying being on that stage singing. It was great to see. I mean, it's things that I feel I don't see a whole lot of genuine happiness. One of the songs she sang, I know it's not the intention of the song, but it made me feel as though those were the words coming from my wife. What she said was, do you think of me? Do you think it's a possibility that I can make you happy? I mean, that just resonated the hell out of me because so often my wife is forgotten about in this equation, how much she's put up with. It's been difficult on her. The spouse of someone who struggles with post-traumatic stress does not have an easy time. It's difficult. They never know what person they're coming home to. They're walking on eggshells. When I'm sad, she's sad. Wherever I go, she's worried. She just wants to be there for me and help me. And for quite a while, I completely lost touch with it. I mean, I knew she did, but it just really wasn't hitting home. It just really wasn't getting through to me clear enough. So since she had me reach out for help, since she's been there despite how much of a raging fucking asshole I could be, because I was so stressed, overwhelmed, and burned out while still working. But she was there the whole time, and I can see that now much more clearly, that I've stepped back, that things have calmed down in my life, that I'm paying more attention to just returning to the person I was before all this ignited me. And so again, I couldn't help in that moment to think that song was coming from my wife, where she would look at me, and although she never said it, I wonder how many times that she thought, do you think of me? Do you think it's a possibility that I can make you happy? Yeah, that's what I thought. And that's all I could think of. At the end of the set, I had the opportunity to meet the lady who was singing. Her name is Hillary. She's from originally Seattle in Washington State. She had moved to the Nashville area about 6 months before. She had played with a band called Fretland, Fretland, and she had stopped by just to thank us for being there. I told her how magical her show was to me, how I actually just felt consumed by the music and relaxed and chilled and enjoyed it, and it spoke to me. And I openly spoke to her about my PTSD. She immediately thanked me for my service. She told me she also bartends at the American Legion, and that while I'm in town, it's a very supportive space, and if I would ever like to drop by for a beer, I was more than welcome. However, she also understood that such places could be triggering. Meeting her was fantastic. I hope she's listened to this. It was an actual, absolute honor, an honor to meet you, Hillary. Thank you for taking the time to play that set. As much as I'm sure you got up that morning preparing to play at that location, you had no thoughts that our paths would cross. Likewise, I woke up that morning in Kentucky, no idea whatsoever that I was going to be hearing you that night. But it came together, and it was meant to, in my opinion, because it was exactly what I needed. The reason I share this with you is because this episode features the wife of a police officer who has post-traumatic stress. And she will tell you what it's like from that side, wondering if anyone thinks of her and if there's a possibility she could make her husband happy. Sit down, stay tuned in. You're going to hear the side of the story from Claire Sobkowicz about her husband, who was previously on this show, Jason Sobkowicz. In the meantime, before we go to break, I'm going to let you hear that song. Well, a portion of the song that I actually recorded live. You'll hear Hillary engaging the crowd and get him to sing along. You can find the song on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever. Just look up Fretland, Fretland. We'll be back after the break.
Imagine somebody's going to need that little twinkle in their eye. We're going to do it all together again. Do you think of me? Do you think it's a possibility? I can make you happy. I can make you happy. All right, louder and worse now. Come on now. Do you think of me? Do you think it's a possibility? I can make you happy. I can make you happy. All right, much louder, much worse. Here we go. Do you think of me? Do you think it's a possibility? I can make you happy. I can make you happy.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the podcast. If you have experience with post-traumatic stress and would like to join me for an episode, please reach out to me. You can contact me via direct message on Instagram, PTSD_podcast, or you can send me an email at Papa Tango Sierra Delta Podcast @gmail.com. Cheers.
We are back from the break. Thank you very much for sticking around to hear the rest of the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast. I can assure you that you've actually stuck around for the best part of this podcast. This is one that's really going to make a difference to a lot of people. I can speak from my side when I say a lot of people ask me how I'm doing, but nobody really ever realizes maybe how others around me are doing. And I will just start off by saying that it was my wife and my daughters who first told me that maybe I should go speak to someone because they recognized it. And so with that said, I am very, very happy to welcome Claire Sobkowicz to the show. How are you, Claire?
It's been a busy day, but I am so happy to be here, and I'm just so humbled by your inviting me and, caring about the other side of the story. That really means a lot. So thank you.
Absolutely. It's a huge part of the story. And, we had mentioned before the show, didn't want to use the word that you tend to be forgotten, but I have no issue using that word to say, yeah, you tend to be forgotten, and people don't realize how much strain it puts on your wife, your husband, your kids, your parents. I mean, especially anyone who's residing with you full time, because whatever your emotions are, even if you feel completely numb, it's hurting them. It's hurting your loved ones. Claire, give us a little bit of a background about Jason, your husband, just to fill people in who didn't happen to hear Jason's episodes. And if you didn't, you need to go back and listen. They're freaking awesome. They're phenomenal. But tell us a little bit about Jason and your relationship.
Absolutely. So Jason and I were both, sorry, it's very weird to call him Jason. I call him Jay.
All right, Jay. Jay it is. Jay it is.
So Jay and I were both born and raised here in this small little Northern Ontario town. He is actually quite a bit older than me. This is going to sound very strange, but we met when he was in college and working his summer job with my mom.
There you go. I like this. I'm interested already.
Yeah, so I was like this, this tiny little person, and he was an adult, and I thought he was pretty cute, but I was 10 and he was 19. And so, he was around. He'd come have beers with my folks in the evenings after work and, on the Fridays after work. Then just life went on, and I grew up and went away to school, and he went to police college, came back to Fort Frances, and started his career here. In that time, I was a high school student. I had experienced some vandalism to my vehicle, and he was the police officer that I had to deal with. And again, thought he was super handsome, still way too young. Then I went away to college. He went on with his life and had a child and a couple of serious relationships. And then I moved back in with my parents, and we reconnected through, famous social media. And the rest is history. We fell in love hard and fast, and I wouldn't change a thing.
Wow. It sounds serendipitous, actually. It sounds like this was just meant to be.
It does. It feels that way. And I mean, we've had our struggles and our trials and tribulations. And through all of it, he's always said, I can't believe you've stuck around. And it is really hard to imagine my life without him. And as hard as it is, I wouldn't trade any bit of it to change who he is. And so I'm very lucky to have him, and I thank my lucky stars every day.
That's wonderful to hear. And there's absolutely no doubt in speaking with Jay that he's lucky to have you as well. And you've really been there for him. And I just want to thank you for being there for my brother. And I know things have been tough for you. So if you can just maybe speak to what it's like to be the wife of someone who is struggling with PTSD, especially a police officer, someone in the service industries, because, it tends to be, I think, a little more difficult at times just in terms of the personalities we carry.
When I got together with Jay, he was the absolute definition of type A alpha male. That was back in my early 20s. That's what I was attracted to, and he had it all. Our relationship started off, and we traveled, and we enjoyed each other, and we hunted and fished, and he got me out in the bush. He'd helped me get my first deer. It was that young love. Then after a few years, we got engaged. We started planning a wedding. We went on a bunch of trips. And then the incident that led to kind of his downward spiral to where we are now is it happened. I rember the incident. I remember him telling me about it. And didn't really think anything else of it until years later. And I knew that ordeal that he went through with that incident was horrific. And I remember how sick he was with the drugs that he had to be on to try to prevent himself from catching. If you haven't listened to that episode with Jay, to whoever's listening to this, go back and listen. He explains what happened, and I don't really want to hash that out again. But it was a horrific ordeal, and he never opened up to me about the nightmares and the experiences that he had following that event. And we went into, we just went into years of, we were just comfortable, and I never really knew what was wrong. And he always was a procrastinator, call him the master procrastinator. And that got worse. And the things that he used to take pride in doing just kind of fell to the wayside, and he was trying to find anything to get through the day. And I didn't know about the over-the-counter pain medication abuse and the drinking. And when I found out about that, I felt like I had failed, because I felt like I missed something. And I felt like he was slipping away from me. And I knew that he had always told me that he would never, not leave me in a sense, like walking away from me, but that he would never do anything that left me without him. But a lot of the time, it already felt like he wasn't there. I felt like I was parenting by myself, and, I almost felt like I was caring for another person. And that was really hard. I mean, I was struggling at work with my own, I worked in healthcare at the time, and we all know what happened through COVID with healthcare.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And in order to save my own mental health, I left healthcare. I left, I went to university for 5 years, and I had a career for 9 years, and I just walked away for something that I had never done before. And I just threw in the towel and walked away.
Wow.
When I say that, Larry, I had never experienced an anxiety attack or a panic attack. And I know that Jay talks about those in his episodes with you, where he talks about the incident in his deer stand where he had to get his mother to come and get him because he was in such a panic mode. And the times where he drove his cruiser up the ramp at the hospital to the emergency room because he didn't know what was wrong. I have since experienced that, where I never had felt anxiety like that before. And since all of this has come to a head and he's gotten his help, I've started to experience those types of things, not on a regular basis like Jay, but big events or things that really rattle me to my core. They cause me to go into like a complete panic, and I end up like full tears on the phone with Jay talking me down. So, as lucky as he may be to have me, I'm beyond thankful to have him to hold me up half the time too.
I think that's going to resonate with a lot of spouses out there, of people who have post-traumatic stress disorder injuries, whatever you want to call it, because I agree. What it sounds like to me is, in so long of seeing what he was going through, being there and experiencing it, you've endured some traumas as well, because that's your husband. It's the person you love. This is not because bad things happen. Okay, I understand. But you're seeing a person who has changed in a short amount of time, someone you love and care for, and there's no convincing me of otherwise. That's traumatic. And I believe that you've experienced something quite similar. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely would. And I think that for the longest time, I don't want to say that I wasn't allowed, but I felt like I was unable to share my true feelings because, like you said, walking on eggshells, I felt like I was going to hurt someone, mainly my husband, right? That person that I love. I was always worried that I was going to break his heart by telling him the truth of how I felt or opening up about that. So I was stifling my own feelings for the longest time because I couldn't talk to anybody about it because no one understood.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
It resonates with me. It's hitting home with me, Claire, because A couple of weeks ago, I volunteered at the Cracked Armor booth with Mark Long, who's a troopmate of mine, really has dealt with a tough blow with PTSD. And at the booth, I remember there was a lady there talking about her husband and what he did for a living. And I won't get into too many particulars, but Mark said, "Oh, he must struggle from PTSD." And I heard her reply, "No, he doesn't. He's fine. Everything's fine." Mark's like, "Oh, has he been to things like this?" "Yeah." "Has he been to things like that?" "Yeah." "Well, he's likely struggling from PTSD." And again, she said, "No." Mark said, "All right, let me ask you. Does he get mad very often? Does he drink much? Do you feel like you have to walk on eggshells around him?" "Yeah." "He's got PTSD." And that's the reality of what it is from the shoes of the other person in the house. So tell us some of the things that you experienced.
I constantly felt for the longest time, and I still do this to a certain extent, where I have to kind of say, okay, I feel like I'm getting naggy. Can we like pick up the pace a little bit? And so we've, Jay and I have developed strategies to help him remember the mundane things that he may not care much about, or the things that in the forefront of his mind aren't that important. So, we have a whiteboard in our dining room where we write down to-do lists. He has a notebook where he writes down to-do lists. So there's things that don't get forgotten, because and honestly, Larry, like this is within the last 30 days where I've had to open up and say, "Honey, it really hurts my feelings when I ask you to do something, and out of the 19 things that you do in a day, the one thing that I asked for didn't get done." And I've had to explain to him that hurts my feelings, because it makes me feel like the things that I think are important aren't important to you. But the reality of, like how I told you, Larry, that I changed jobs. I took a job where I worked a 7.5 hour day, and I moved into a 9.5 hour day. So I leave at the same time in the morning, and I get home an hour and 45 minutes late in the afternoon.
Makes a difference. Big difference.
It's a huge difference. So then there's not a lot of things that I can do in the daytime anymore. I used to be able to go to the grocery store after work or run and get dog food. Everything's closed when I get done work. I don't have that option anymore. So a lot of our, the mundane everyday chores have now fallen on my husband. And I've had to really get to the point where, like, he would say, "Just nag me and I'll eventually do it." And I said, "Well, I don't want to nag you. I want to ask you once. And if you have to write it down, you write it down and you cross it off when it's done. But I don't want to have to ask 4 times." That's just one example of the things that I've experienced. But I mean, like I said, my mental health took a spiral. I did see a counselor for a short period of time and worked through, some of my own stuff. But we have a blended family and we own a little hobby farm. Most farmers out there are going to tell you that there's no money in that, and it's true. So, it's a constant, I work an extra job because Jay has lost so much of his normal wage. Right now, he's currently on WSIB that's covering most of his previous wage while he's off and healing and taking care of himself. But it's a huge difference in what we see in 2023 than we did in 2021 when he was working. Normally he would pick up overtime shifts to make up the difference, and I waitress in the evenings once in a while to try to make up some extra money so that we can get the things that we want and live the life that we're used to. And I don't mind doing that. I am happy to contribute, and the kids understand, but it keeps me away from the house a lot more than it used to. And although I do enjoy it, it's a nice little social. I also, I now sell cars. So all day is social.
There you go. Yeah.
So sometimes at the end of waitressing and working at the dealership all day, I'm all peopled out.
Well, that sounds familiar to me, just on a Tuesday even. So I hear you. I love the fact that you brought the financial side into it, because that is a reality for a lot of people. That's a huge issue, obviously, for just survival of things and paying the bills, but it puts an incredible strain on a relationship. And I love the fact that you brought that up, because it's a reality that most people don't think of. What are some other things, Claire, that I guess ultimately what I want to get through is your journey and really what you would say to others out there. It's not a direct question. I'm not asking you what you would say. I guess just people should listen and learn from your experiences. So yeah, your journey.
As you touched a bit on the financial aspect again, in previous years when Jay was gung-ho to work overtime, and he never wanted to, but if a shift came up and it worked with our schedule, he would take it so that, we've booked a trip to Cuba. Well, this will pay for it, or, things like that. It was an easy way, or like, hey, I'm going to go buy new tires for the four-wheeler or whatever. Work a shift, work a few shifts, and that helps cover the cost of something that we want, that we don't need. That has drastically changed things, and our life is so much more expensive out on the farm. A couple of years ago, after COVID had hit, but before gas prices went crazy, and Jay was kind of riding those dopamine highs. So anything that would give him that bump of adrenaline where he felt good was something that he was going for. And so, this big, beautiful truck showed up at the dealership that I now work at, and he had to have it. He went and talked to them, and everything worked out, and the payments worked, and he could afford it, and we're sitting pretty. So he asked me, is it okay if I do this? And I said, well, it's not my truck. I can't tell you what to do and what not to do. So the next day, that big, beautiful truck was in the driveway. And this past fall, I watched that big, beautiful truck drive out of the driveway because we couldn't afford it anymore.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's fine, because what we have now is perfect for us. Jay drives it back and forth every week to his psychology appointments. And for anybody out there listening, you probably may not understand the geography of where we are, but my husband drives 4 hours there and back to see his psychologist.
Holy shit.
So it is not just the stress of going through the appointments, which I know, like, he'll text me afterwards and say, oh God, I sweated through 2 t-shirts. It is the added stress of traveling in shitty weather, because if I look outside, I can see the 6 inches of snow that landed in my driveway last night. And most often, the day that he gets ready to go for a trip, we get a snowstorm.
Always the way, right? Always the way.
It happens nearly every time. So back to the truck. So he takes it. It's great on gas. The new truck is I shouldn't say new. We traded in a 2020 for a 2013, but it is perfect for us. We don't need anything fancy. We are not fancy people, and we are much happier in it because it is not digging a hole in the bank account. But that's just an example of those dopamine highs that you ride for, a few couple weeks, and then it's over, and then you're like, oh shit, I got a $500 bi-weekly truck payment.
Yep. That makes perfect sense, because you're just always looking for that little thing that's going to make you happy. And you kind of go, that's what's going to make me happy. And it does for a little while, but it loses luster after a while too, right?
Absolutely. So, I mean, in the moment, you're like, wow, look at this truck, or look at this four-wheeler, or whatever it is that you brought home this week. But in the end, that doesn't fix us from the inside. And I can sing Dr. Johnston's praises for a millennia with what he's done for my husband, because Jay has changed so drastically in the last, I'm going to say, year. It has been longer than that. But he's always been very intellectual. He reads, even when I met him, he had a bookshelf full of physics books, believe it or not.
Wow.
And I attempted to read one time, and I think I got through about 100 pages, and I was like, I have no idea what I just read. I'm going to move on and go back to my true crime novels, because that's my jam.
Yeah, right? Why not? Who the hell wants to read physics books, man? Whoa.
Apparently this guy, but now he's reading psychology books. He's reading, I couldn't even begin to tell you, but there's probably about 40 downstairs that he hasn't even started. But he's able to have these really deep intellectual conversations with his psychologist that I don't want to say I don't have the capacity for it, but it doesn't interest me. I have a hard time following along, and I'm just happy that he has someone that he can really dive into that stuff with. And Dr. Johnston is so incredibly knowledgeable, and he's behind us 100%, and he's so supportive. And just this week, I got home from work and Jay had said to me, Dr. Johnston called a little while ago. And I said, what? And he just called? And he said, well, no, he got a call from WSIB today. I said, okay, and how did that go? And he said, well, apparently they claim that I'm bored.
Bored?
Yeah. I said, I don't think I've ever even heard you say the word bored. I said, other than telling our kids that it's unacceptable to say that you're bored because we have this massive area to play in, like go outside, you won't be bored anymore.
Bored. I just can't get past that. I apologize to keep coming back to this, Claire, but I'm trying to wrap my mind around how it is that a workers' compensation board can make a declaration that they believe an individual is bored.
Yeah. So going back to my conversation with Jay, I said, where would that even come from? You don't use that language. And he said, well, the only thing that I can think of is that when they asked how I'm doing, I said that it feels like Groundhog Day.
Oh, Jesus.
So because he has all of these things now that he has to do to keep himself on track. We're up at 5. We're on the couch having coffee, and then he's meditating. And then we get the kids off to school. I go to work. He's gone to the gym. He comes home from the gym, gets outside, does his chores, or the horses are fed before he goes to the gym. But it's the same thing every day, right? He maybe fits a grocery shop in there. He comes home. He does his schoolwork, sits in front of the computer for a few hours and does that. He starts cooking dinner. He tidies the house, runs a load of laundry. So it is like Groundhog Day. But so are my days.
Right. Absolutely.
I go to the same job. My days are different in that I'm dealing with different customers or a different vehicle that I'm learning about the specs or what have you. But my days are the same. It's just whether or not I'm putting my uniform on and going to Boston Pizza at the end of my shift.
Yep, exactly. I agree with you 100%.
In saying that, it caught me off guard, and I'm so disappointed and disheartened that there's such a rift in, let's not take care of people. Let's just try to shoo them out the door.
Yep.
Right? Instead of what do you need from us? It's how can we get rid of you faster?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it takes me back to, I'm trying to think of the timeline because it's been so goddamn long, Larry, since Jay submitted his grievance to the OPP that I honestly can't even, it's been a year and he's heard nothing. The last that I heard of it was that there were others that had come in since that were more recent. So his was getting pushed back.
Oh, sounds convenient.
Yeah. And so he got pushed around and bullied and treated like shit because he stood up for himself at work. For 12 years, this happened. And, it's just been so long, so he can wait a little bit longer. It just constantly feels like you're being pushed on, stepped on, pushed to the side. He's waited this long. He can wait a little longer.
When this is happening, so let's go over the past couple of years when all this stuff is going on with Jay. And you can witness it and you can see it. What is a typical day or a typical week like for you? I know you'd have to go to work for sure, but there's also times that you're worried about Jay. You're struggling yourself. I mean, tell us about what was going on from your side as Jay was going through his troubles.
So for me, Larry, Jay had so much trouble sleeping for the longest time that I would wake up and he wouldn't be there. And I instantly panic, run down the stairs looking for him. Don't know where he is. He's usually on the couch, but there's this instant fear. Where the hell is he?
Yeah, I understand.
Did he leave?
Yeah.
Like you were saying earlier with the walking on eggshells, I never felt, I still sometimes don't feel like I can tell him how I really feel. Like I can tell him how frustrated I am or, we've gotten so much better. And in the last couple of months, since he's had a chance to talk to you and talk to Mark and connect with people that are like him, because there aren't a lot of people that are like him. Or they're just not out there.
There actually are so many. The reality is there are so few who are willing to speak out about it. because of the stigmas, because they're embarrassed about it, because they feel they're less, especially, I mean, as Jay and I spoke about the police culture. I mean, the reality is it's the whole suck it up buttercup world. And so, yeah, they don't want to talk about it. And I mean, very much so, like you said, when Jay went through that horrendous experience, he didn't talk about it for a while. And I would honestly think it was for the same reasons. No, this is not happening to me. No, I got shit under control, until he's in the deer stand or until he's driving the patrol car and things happen. So, yeah, I mean, you just don't get it.
Yeah, so there were so many times where, and I mean, at this point, like I knew he was struggling. I knew, he was seeing Dr. Johnston. Things were happening, and he was growing as a person and learning different ways to help himself. But it's still very much, like just yesterday, I had to, and this goes back to the things that he would normally work overtime and help pay for. He's doing a university course right now. That's something that's been a goal of his forever. And this has nothing to do with him suffering from PTSD, maybe the course of choice, but his procrastination has gotten the best of him. Now we've had to apply for an extension for him to finish his schooling for the year, which costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
So there's that added stressor of now I'm, searching the shift shop, seeing if there's anything up that I can snag so that I can make an extra $100 or to toss at bills like that. So I struggle talking to him about his procrastination and about the things that upset me, because it still sometimes feels like it falls on deaf ears. And I mean that in the nicest way possible, but sometimes I feel like I'll say something like I was talking about the nagging, and it, the next day I'm like, okay, so how about that? Did that get done? Oh no, I'll do it tomorrow. So that has been a real struggle for me, because he was always the person that I could talk to about anything. And then I felt like I didn't have anybody to talk to. I grew up feeling like we deal with our marriage internally. I know that that's been mentioned to me before. Oh, no, that's not my marriage. So it's fallen on me to try to figure out how to navigate something that I have no clue how to navigate. And I am trying to learn and grow every day. And I was mentioning about how much Jay has changed. And, in the course of a week, he's, oh, you should try this. You should try to meditate with me. Maybe we'll try this tomorrow. And I'm just not there yet. And I've had to gently tell him, like, honey, I'm not ready. I need to do me for a bit. And I have struggled with my own, like I said, I completely changed jobs because of where my head was at. And I think the reality is that I rely on him so much for life now that it's a stressor in a different way for me. At the end of the day, I'm rushing home so I can see the kids before they hop in the bath. And he is just such a rock in our home, where he takes care of, he takes care of me. He takes care of most of the things in the house. He is such a caring and helpful husband, and I'm so lucky to have someone so supportive. My weeks are mundane and they're the same. And now that he is on this path to healing, he really sees the value in having that time to yourself to reflect and take care of you instead of everyone else. My Monday nights, I get my little girl off to Sparks and I get to do me for a couple of hours. So, I've been able to reconnect with some girlfriends. We've all got new jobs and kids, and we're busy and struggling with our own life event. So I've been able to reconnect with those girlfriends, and I've taken up cross stitching of all hobbies. I feel like a little old lady, but
It's good. Keeps you busy, right? Keeps your mind busy.
it honestly does. And I had a pretty massive surgery last spring, and Jay was so incredibly helpful. And other than him having to travel for his appointments where I needed to get help around the house because I was in a cast for 7 weeks, he cooked and cleaned and took care of me and took care of the kids. And I think that through all of this, he has really grown as a man. He is no longer this super alpha personality. He's still definitely type A, but he is just so much more compassionate. And, conversations that we would have had 2 years ago don't even exist anymore. We enjoy so many little things in life that went completely ignored in our past. We sit outside in the sunshine together on the weekend. We got home with the kids and the kids were tuckered out. They came inside and we just sat outside and had a kombucha in the yard, sitting in our little lawn chairs in our snow pants, just soaking up some good old vitamin D and visiting. And, those are things that fell apart for so long, where we just cohabitated. We barely spoke to each other.
That's deep. Like, you're hitting the nail on the head. It's cohabitating. Yeah, that's what you're doing.
Yeah, and when I tell you that, we talked to each other and we, had a life together, but everything just felt like, I felt like I missed him when I was gone. And then when I got home, it was like, oh, okay, here we go again. Let's get through the rest of the night, wake up in the morning and do it all again. Where, oh, am I being summoned for bedtime songs? Okay. Sorry, I've completely lost track of where I was, Larry. I'll finish what I was saying and then I'm going to go sing bedtime songs.
Yeah, finish what you were saying. And we can end off here. Even you could briefly just tell other spouses, I guess, some cues that you look back on now and go, yeah, I see that now, that I missed it at the time. Some things that maybe they can pay attention for to know what's happening.
Back then, I was so deep in. So after his first kind of experience where he took some time from work, started seeing a psychologist, that was after we had our son. So I was so deep in parenting a not quite 2-year-old and a newborn that I feel like I missed everything. But the things that I really noticed were him fading away from the conversation that we used to have and the joy that we used to get in the things that we did all the time. When we lived in town, it was, every day I'd get home from work and it was a beautiful Wednesday afternoon in the summer. And it was, okay, we're going to go to Grammy and Grampy's. We're going to have a few beers on the deck. Kids can play in the pool. And when I say pool, my parents have like a little Tykes pool on their deck, and it's the highlight of our summer.
Yeah.
Those things started becoming a chore where he didn't want to go. And so I would go by myself, or, we would go and he would just kind of sit there, not talk to anybody. And our conversation started fading between each other. My constant nagging and reminders and asking for him to do things, it just felt like it was becoming a regular thing. Whereas before it was like, oh yeah, I know you're going to procrastinate on that thing you have to do. But all of these little things, I'd be like, hey, can you put that light switch back on? Or little things like that never got forgotten, where, those things started to slip through my fingers. And I was noticing this pile up of things that I didn't have the time to do because I was at work.
As my therapist says, those are classic PTSD signs. Like, exactly. And every single one of them, I'm like, yep, check. Oh, yep, check. Oh yeah, that was me too, check. Claire, would you say it's fair to say that this also is not something that just click, it happens overnight? It's sort of this gradual thing that it's easy to miss because it doesn't, again, it's not a light switch.
Absolutely. And it was every once in a while, it was a little bit more here, a little bit more there. But we got to the point, and honestly, in the end, it was him that said, like, after, the big blowout where he just drove his cruiser back to the detachment, parked it and said, I'm going home. And he's never gone back. So it was him that finally realized that he needed help. But it's a year ago. It was either just recently, I try not to think about the date, but we lost a good friend. When I say that I've known this person since they moved here, which I can easily say is longer than Jay has known him, and Jay worked with him for his entire career. But I was a tiny little girl when I met this person. And when I was pregnant, every day I would meet him at the soccer fields and throw balls for our dogs. And it was so often that I would spend time just him and I just visiting, throwing balls for the dogs. And I still drive down the street, pass a truck. Oh, nope, it's not his truck.
So sorry for your loss. So sorry.
Yeah. So, I've I know, I remember, nights since all of this has started where I've broken down and just said, please don't ever leave me. You can't ever do that to me. And it's not their choice. They don't want to leave. They think that that's all they have left. It breaks my heart that they feel that way and that they feel like they can't reach out for help, because there are assholes out there that won't understand. I can express one of those to you, where a person at my husband's detachment told him, "Oh yeah, I have PTSD too. I just ignore it. Just do that and you'll get better."
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Like, pardon my French, but are you fucking kidding me?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's that's out to fucking lunch. I mean, that's out to lunch. That's like just saying, I don't know. I just got fucking shot, but I mean, I'll just ignore it. It'll go away. What?
Yeah, just ignore it. The bullet will pop out the other side.
It'll go away. I mean, I'll bleed for a little bit and shit, but I'll be good. I'll be fine. What? Fuck.
And then there are people that, since we've, noticed these cues from Jay, these things that, now they're falling into place. And we were talking about like the things to look for, and maybe the, once a week, hey honey, we're out of Tylenol. I didn't take any Tylenol last week. Why are we out of Tylenol? Well, I know now.
There you go.
But,
yeah.
I was so, like I said, so deep in that newborn life. I never slept. It was constant in and out of the car, going to all these play dates, doing all this stuff. And he was a shift worker. So when he was on his 4 days off, he had things that I expected of him. And looking back at it now, maybe had I not been so deep in trying to do all of the things, I maybe would have noticed.
No. I'm going to stop you there, and I'm going to just let you know that none of this in any way, shape, or form was your fault. None of it was. And so please don't ever even let that thought into your mind. I only asked to share because there's other people that miss the signs. They were missed for a long time in my house because nobody has experience with this. They just don't know what the hell's going on. But it's not your fault. You didn't miss it. And so something happened. No, something already happened. And it just, again, is such a slow, gradual process that when it finally hits a culmination point, oh, everything then kind of comes in as shit. Yeah. Oh, I didn't realize that. But even to us, we miss that. I mean, I would for a long time argue, well, yeah, I would always get angry. Yeah, not like that. You would get angry about certain things, but you wouldn't just get angry because, fuck man, you stubbed your toe, or just the smallest thing didn't work out for you, drop the keys and you're losing your mind. It takes time to get to that. So Claire, that is not your fault. And the reality is, again, you and anyone else whose spouse is struggling with PTSD are absolute angels. And the only hope we ever have of pushing forward and staying above sod is because of our loved ones, people like you. And that's the reality. And that's something I know I don't express enough to my wife. And I'm sure Jay doesn't to his. But the weird thing about us is that we think these things and we just don't seem to say them. So please know that. Claire, I know you've got some kids that are waiting for mom to come in and sing them a song. Before we end off, and I don't want to take any more of your time, and I appreciate you giving me time. You're so busy. Is there anything else that you wanted to add? This is your time. Feel free.
I guess in closing, Larry, because if I don't close in the next 10 minutes, I will have two tiny people in my bed saying, "Where's my song?"
You should. You should.
I will. I guess what I want to express is just that it is a constant uphill battle, and I believe that it probably will be for the rest of our life, and that's okay. But just remember, and I know that Jay has told me this so many times, and he just said, like, those vows that we said to each other on our wedding day, we're really putting them to the test, because we have been to what feels like hell and back, and we're still not all the way back, but we're climbing that ladder every day. And Jay does expressed to me quite often how thankful he is for me. And that really helps kind of solidify why we say those vows and why we pledge ourselves to one another in marriage. And it's a lot more than meets the eye. And if you do miss those signs or you start to see them and you're met with resistance, just keep pushing, because the light at the end of the tunnel is really worth it. And I'm just so thankful that we're coming out the other side and we're getting there, and we've been able to get back to those good, strong conversations that we had beforehand, where we can be open and honest with each other. And I'm just so thankful that we do have some of the community that we have. I know my husband's supervisor at work, who also struggles herself, has been such a light to us, and she's always someone that I can hop on the phone or on chat with and hash it out, and that's been really, really great. And that Jay's been able to connect with you and Mark and some of the other people that he's met along his journey, and it really means a lot to know that you guys are there for us and we're there for you, but from the other side of the country. And it's been a really eye-opening experience, and I'm just so thankful that we've made it this far, and we're just going to continue to climb.
We have to be there for each other. We just have to be. And I'm so thankful to have met you guys and to know that you guys are there for me. And I'm also very grateful that you know that I am there for you. And one of the things I want to touch on before we end is just when you said that the marriage vows get put to the test. And the reality is, when we said in sickness and in health, I know that this was never the sickness that was ever thought about, at least in my marriage. But she's been there for me, and she's maintained her vows as I have mine. And to everyone out there who's listening, if you're a spouse that has someone who's struggling, I thank you very much. If you are struggling, take a moment to think of your spouse and make sure you thank them as well. My name is Larry Payton. I have your 6. Please have mine. Claire's asked to add a short note to this podcast. Claire, go ahead.
So I was just thinking of all of the ways that Jay has changed over the last year or so, and something that I think means a lot to him because it's part of his daily routine, and it's so special to me, is that every day he cuts a little tiny piece of paper and he writes me a love note. Some days it may not be a love note. Some days it may be like a little inspirational quote or something, but I have a pocket in my work bag and also a pocket in my purse that are full of these little folded up love notes that he's written me over the last year or so. I just wanted to share my favorite one because it just chokes me up. I opened it was probably about 3 weeks ago, and it just said, "Let's do this for 60 more years. And I hope we get 80.
Yeah, that's remarkable. That is special. I love that.
And I will someday probably put them all in a giant frame and hang them in our farmhouse somewhere.
I love it. That'd be something I'd like you to share, actually. I would love to see that. That is inspirational. And I do thank Jay for doing it, and I do thank your appreciation for it because it's reciprocal. Thanks, Claire, for sharing that.
Thank you, Larry. I've never thrown one out, and I never will.